Hi, welcome to EDSC 550. This is week 2, and I'm Professor Bobo. This week you have your first assignment that is due, which is the Achievement Gap assignment. We've discussed this and gone over it in our first live session. And then you also have your one discussion board that is due this week. Please remember that discussion boards are due on Thursday with 2 peer responses by Sunday evening. All right. This week, we'll be talking about implicit bias in chapters 3 and 4. And I will go ahead and share my screen with you. All right. This week, we are talking about implicit bias. All right. So, the first step with implicit bias is just basically acknowledging that every person has an implicit bias and that biases relate to race. This isn't a judgment against those with bias, it's a natural part of the way that our brains work. And we are a product of a society that we live in and we are affected by. So, one of our constant struggles is to ensure that students have an equitable opportunity in schools. Okay, so what does it mean to be equitable? What it means is making sure that people have the same opportunity as all other people. A great example is if you are a world class runner and you can do the 40 my dash 40-meter dash in 4.5 seconds, right? And then the next person can do it in 10.5 seconds because they're not as fast as a track and field star. So, in order to make them equitable and cross the finish line at the same time, we would have to give the difference between the 10.7 and the 4.5 head start. And by giving that person a head start, we're making it a more equitable race. One person is more skilled with their ability to run the race, and the other person is a little bit slower. So that is our goal in academics, behavior, and social emotional learning. How do we decrease that deficit? So sometimes bias is very uncomfortable to talk about. Most of the time, adults shy away from it because they're worried that it may look insensitive or they may be accused of being a racist. So, some statistics in education and students of colors have achieved at significantly lower rates than white students. And so, when we ask why that is, you'll hear about parent involvement, poverty, attitudes in education, or other factors that presume superiority to the mainstream white culture to justify lower achievement rates. However, in 2013, the National Assessment for Education Progress project found that the average reading score for eighth grade Black students from middle class households is the same as white students from households eligible for free and reduced lunches. 78% of African American people in the United States do not live in poverty, according to Kaiser Foundation in 2017. And even though the vast majority of African American friends, students, and colleagues were not living in poverty, there were often a false association between poverty and being Black. So one of the things that we're going to discuss in our course is it opportunity gap or is it achievement gap? So they were able to succeed with achievement. However, maybe the opportunity was not available to them. And so that's what we'll be discussing. So bias can exist whether you consciously agree with it or not. We are explicit cognitive thought processes to explain our implicitness away. And ethical standards and positions for the American Counseling Association underscore the importance of combating bias. So one of the things to remember about bias is that we're all going to have it. It is important to understand that your first thought may be a biased thought. But then after that, what do we do with that information? Do we start to reflect, self-talk, let us know that's not, an accurate statement? And then how do we begin to change and advocate for that group? So implicit bias is known as implicit prejudice, implicit attitudes. It is a negative attitude of which one is not consciously aware of against a specific social group. Implicit bias is thought to be shaped by experience and based on learned associations. Okay. So these associations or qualities could be including race, gender, or social categories. The individual's perception and behaviors can be influenced by the implicit biases that they hold, even if they're unaware that they hold these biases. So it's important, like I said earlier, that we acknowledge that we have the biases, but that we do the self talk and the reflection to really find the evidence of if this is true or not. So, chapter 4 again goes on to discuss the benefits of self reflection, which is something that I just talked about. It is important for us to have that self reflection, to go back to, is this true? And where do I gather my facts from that indicates that this is a true statement? And that helps us to advocate and for those underrepresented groups. So here's a diagram that indicates like where you are in relationship and your biases in relationship to others. So first it's you, your family, school-wide, community, and society. And then in the school, it's you, your faculty, your neighborhood, and your systems. So at the individual level of ecology, it allows us to focus on what we are, where we come from, and how we develop. At the familiar level, we have to take time to understand and cope with people in our lives whom we did not choose. So some of us have family that nurture, encourage, and support us and believe in us, and some of us do not. This underlying system of values is what we inherit simply because we were born to people who raised us. So, what is the student educator counselor dynamic? Just about every counselor and educator is asked to create a philosophy that practices at some point, a philosophy that they practice at some point in their career. We are tasked to reveal how we believe that this might impact our students. Most of us want to be helpers and listeners and encouragers, but rarely do counselors consider themselves to be agents of change in a racial society. So the counselor, teacher, administrator um, relationship talks about how we address um, these our biases and how we share that with other staff members. So, one of the suggestions that they have is that we have professional development. And with that professional development, we can collaborate with our colleagues, understand the biases. Now, just because we have our biases and just because we have our belief systems doesn't mean that we should not open and have a dialogue about it. Now, once we're having the dialogue about it, it doesn't mean that we will always agree, but we can take what the information into consideration and say, I didn't know that, or I didn't think about that. And that helps us to self-reflect and then take a different step towards our own biases and how we can not let those biases affect the students and parents that we come in contact with. Intersectional identity, it relates to race, and it's the overlapping and entwining nature of the people. This intersection of race and sibling order or gender and influences are examples of how complex the human condition is. We have to describe identity above and you have to connect your experiences on how you express yourself as a person. So, one of the things that we ask is like, okay, what is your position? What is your position statement? What are two of your identifiers that intersect congruently? And how do two identifiers have similar experiences? So, an example of this is if you're a Black woman, you may identify as being Black and a woman. And those two characteristics that share similar experiences of scrutiny or unreasonable expectation. Or maybe you're a person who identifies as LGBTQAI plus and come from a poor working class family. And you may view these characteristics as having similar experiences or judgment or shame or even commercially self-driven and pride. So I want you to take a moment and think about what are your two identifiers that intersect incongruently. So, for example, being born into a wealthy family or a Spanish speaking, or being young in age and burnt out and stressed at work. So, by doing this, you can identify even deeper and more complex ways that your belief system has been influenced. So, self reflection involves a multitude of level of insight. It is designed to increase awareness and understanding. Each level of insight offers a layer that can help inform school counselors' practices. So, self reflection is something that we need to make sure that we do often and regularly. Because from one year to the next, even if you're working with the same general population, things are changing. An example of that is I've been at the same elementary school for approximately 10 years now. And I cannot say that even though my population hasn't changed, the dynamics, the culture, the parenting styles have all changed. And so I can't use the same things that I thought of, from the community 9 years ago, um, with the families that are there today. Okay. So just a reminder to complete your assignments this week. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me either through text or email. Thank you so much. Have a great